You're gonna want to hear this one. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rahanna and thank you for clicking on my video today. Today I'm talking about another court and crime case. This one literally reminds me of the movie Fatal Attractions. I know it's quite old, but honestly, the case I'm going to cover today of Sheila Davalloo and everything that she did in her love triangle and ended up in one murder and also one attempted murder is just crazy. It's just crazy. Let me just tell you that right now. So if you're interested in court and crime cases like this, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and if you like the video today, please hit it with a thumbs up. I appreciate the view, and let's get right into this case. Sheila Davalloo was born on May 11th in 1969. She is of Iranian descent, and her parents immigrated to the United States in New York in the mid to late 1970s, where she grew up and had an excellent education background with so many promising opportunities. She attended SUNY Stony Brook and earned her own biochemistry degree at a very young age. By the time Sheila was 19 years old, she got married to her first husband, Fareed Massavi. And in a tradition in her family, it's very important to have your marriage long-lasting and long-standing. While attending medical school in Valhalla, New York, Sheila met Paul Christos and immediately had an attraction to him and a connection to him. And she and Paul were in an affair while she was still married to her first husband, Fareed. When Fareed learned that Sheila was having an affair with Paul, he divorced Sheila, and that ended their relationship. But Sheila was happy so that she could continue pursuing Paul. And Paul and Sheila actually ended up getting married as well. Sheila was happy, you know. She was in her prime. She was married to Paul. She just got a career as a research scientist at Purdue Pharma, and you know, Paul, he was taking on the last bit of his doctorate doing epidemiology, and the couple was making like 6 figures income together, and they were doing really well for themselves. They moved into an apartment and they were settling down in Connecticut. But despite such a successful career that both of them are building for themselves, you know, in later interviews, Paul said that like there was just, you know, it felt like roommates at a point, and the whole spicy, sexy sort of affair that they were having before had sizzled out, you know. And Sheila, she wanted something more, and you know, she found somebody else. While working at her new job, she came across Nelson Sessler, and he to her was attractive, successful, charming. He had a lot of good qualities that Sheila really liked in a man. So she began an affair with Nelson. So at first it was just work trips that they had together, but there came a point where Sheila wanted to have him stay over and everything. So what Sheila did was she told Paul, her husband, that she has a mentally disabled brother, and this brother would freak out if he knew that Sheila was married. So Sheila requested from Paul to, you know, move all his stuff out for a weekend at a time, or for 2 days at a time, whenever the brother would be visiting their apartment together. And you know, Paul at first, you know, he's such a great guy. He agreed. He said, okay, sure, yeah, I understand. And together they got rid of all evidence of Paul in the apartment. Like, this must have taken like a couple hours, like if you ask me, and a lot of dedication and trust, because he took everything from their apartment, anything that would resemble that he ever lived there, and they would put it away. Then he would go stay in a hotel or with his parents or with a friend. Like, he would be gone for those days. And during that time, he believed that her brother was over at the place staying at for a period of time. It really was Nelson coming over, because Sheila never told Nelson about Paul, and Paul never obviously knew about Nelson. So Nelson would come over. Nelson believes, oh, she's a single girl living in this apartment, you know, we'll hook up, yeah, we'll have fun, okay, and it's all over, it's all good. And they did this for a whole summer straight, and to a point Paul was kind of like, come on, please. There comes a point you have to tell your brother that we're married, you know, because it's now ending up being every weekend at this point that Paul has to get up, pretty much move all his stuff out of the house and sleep somewhere else. And you know, he's working hard. He's working very, very hard for his doctorate, and this means even less time with his wife. So he understandably is like really, you know, bothered by this. Sheila's grip on Nelson started to loosen when he met a new employee working at their workplace. Her name was Annalisa Raymundo. And Annalisa is super beautiful, super smart, super young, has everything up ahead of her life. Like, she's beautiful. She has her own apartment, and she's doing very well for herself in the company. And at this point, Nelson's very attracted to her, has no ties to Sheila at all. So, and he decides to cut things off with Sheila because he wants to take things really seriously with Annalisa and see where things take them. And Sheila was very, very pissed off at this, very, very upset at this. She wanted to have both of her worlds. She wanted to have her husband, Paul, and she wanted to have her mistress, you can say, Nelson, right? But she couldn't have him anymore. So she did some stalker-like activities to him. She decided to find his calendar, figure out where he's going, and like one time, for example, Nelson was taking a work trip away, and she went into his calendar and found out where he was going and decided to book a plane ticket and have that seat like right beside him and like be like, oh hey, coincidence, such a coincidence that we're here, same place, same time, same airplane. She also sought out where Annalisa lived, and you know, she began to practice skills of pickpocketing the lock of doors. And you know, she was just doing a lot of stalkerish types of stuff towards trying to invade Nelson's potential new life that he's trying to build with Annalisa. Because at this point, Nelson and Annalisa became engaged, and he really was more serious on her. Although there's a little bit more story to that. You see, Nelson, he had an ex-girlfriend before he met Sheila or even Annalisa. And at times he would go and, you know, sleep with his ex-girlfriend and then come back to Annalisa. I feel like this guy was like all over the place personally, but the point is he was never designated on one specific girl until he became engaged to Annalisa. And there was this point where Annalisa's younger sister was getting married, and she had to, you know, invite Nelson. She didn't have to, but she wanted to invite Nelson to the marriage ceremony and everything. But she felt like her sister was getting married before her. Like, she wants this for herself. So she was very, very, you know, happy to see that, you know, Nelson showed an interest in her long term, you know, being engaged and being together for a long period of time. And that's what she wanted, because, you know, like everybody else in her family is doing that as well. So it's about her time as well. Sheila had said that she understood that Nelson was pursuing a serious relationship with Annalisa and would like step back from it. Like, okay, sure, it was a summer romance thing. It's over now. You do your thing, I'll do my thing. We'll be colleagues. We're all good, right? But obviously she was showing him and she was just being a stalker. And the crazy thing to this is that during all of this time, she spoke to her husband about it. But the way that she spoke to her husband about it, it was in a third person way. So she made up these make-believe characters. She made up Melissa, who, you know, stood for Sheila, and Jack, who stood for Nelson, and Annalisa, which was Annalisa. And she said, okay, so this is the deal. You know, Melissa and Jack, you know, they really have something great, and, you know, Annalisa's there, and Annalisa just wants to, like, be with Jack, and Jack really wants to be with Annalisa, but so much great stuff happened between Jack and Melissa. Why can't, you know, should Melissa, like, pursue? Should Melissa, like, try to get in between Jack and Annalisa? Like, she's literally, I don't know, she got advice from her husband in regards to her own situation. Paul would be like, okay, this is what Melissa should do. So Paul was giving advice indirectly to Sheila on how Sheila can obtain a relationship with Nelson, unknowingly to himself. And Sheila did just that. She continued with stalkerish ways. She continued to try to insert herself into Nelson's life, but in a very like, what a coincidence type of way. A very like, you know, I'm always here whenever stuff goes bad. You can always come to me type of way. And this sort of, you know, passion she had to have a relationship with Nelson overtook her world, to the point that she made such a drastic revenge to try to get Annalisa out of Nelson's life. On November 8, 2002, the body of Annalisa Raymundo was found in her condominium, and she was dead from a severe beating, stabbing, and also there was marks found on her neck showing that she was stunned, like by a stun gun. And the way that the police had found Annalisa in the apartment was an anonymous phone call from a woman stating that a man was seen fleeing from the apartment of Annalisa's, and she was calling to have police come and check it out. Where this phone call came from was from like a restaurant which had like a telephone booth, and this is the person who had left the tip, which led investigators to Annalisa's apartment to find her dead there. And this was like really strange because the 911 operator was not able to identify who was on the phone. The woman would not say who they are, but would only say like, this is the address of Annalisa, go and check on her, and hung up. And when the police initially went to the restaurant, asked like, do you remember seeing who made that phone call? Nobody at the restaurant owners, staff, employees, could not tell who made that phone call. But when the police arrived and they noticed and they saw what happened, it seemed like it was a very big struggle between Annalisa and her attacker. And the police did not know where to go from here. I mean, they took evidence of blood. They found blood in the kitchen. They found blood in the bathroom. And they wanted to, you know, make a very good case as to who did this. But their prime suspect was actually Nelson. Because when he came home and he noticed and he saw that, you know, Annalisa had been murdered, you know, this man, he took a nap in the spare bedroom of where they live. Like, he did not cry. I mean, everybody, like, that's the one thing that you have to know. Everybody takes trauma and pain differently. And this is what Nelson did. And to police, I mean, they looked at it like, why would he not be so emotional? Why would he not be distressed about what had happened to his fiance? Like, it just seemed as though it's all good. But, you know, internally, Nelson was struggling about, you know, losing his future with Annalisa, losing the person that he loved. And he internalized it a lot. And the reason why we know that he internalized it a lot is because he shared a little bit of how he was feeling with trusted old Sheila. Sheila was there for him during this time where he felt like he was alone. He felt like he lost his partner, and you know, he was very saddened by this. And Sheila was there for him. And that shoulder to cry on became an intimate partner once again, and then the affair was back on. And you know, Sheila enjoyed this. That means Nelson was back in her life. There was nobody standing in the way, and you know, she was there to comfort Nelson whenever he needed it. Although the one thing in Sheila's mind that was in the way of her and Nelson's happiness was her husband Paul. And to her, like I said before, in her culture, divorce is not really an option. Divorce is off the table. And the fact that she already had a divorce from her first husband, she did not want to have a second divorce from Paul. So somehow reasoning, instead of going to couples counseling, instead of telling Paul the truth, instead of, you know, ending the affair with Nelson, coming clean, she thought of having a little game with Paul. And this game included them taking household objects and being blindfolded one at a time, being blindfolded and handcuffed, and guessing what the object was. So Paul understood that this was like something that Sheila had learned at work, and it wasn't like sexual in nature, but honestly, at this point, he knew that the marriage was failing. He saw what I guess Sheila was seeing way before, that like it was more of a roommate situation compared to like a unity, a marriage together. And he wanted to have, you know, anything that would help, you know, his failing marriage. He really cared for her, and it was 2 years of being together at this point. And so he did the game, right? Sheila was first. She was, you know, blindfolded, handcuffed. He took a vase, I don't know, and he like rubbed it on her, and she guessed what it was, and you know, so forth. And then it was Paul's turn. So when Paul was blindfolded and handcuffed and he was on the bed, Sheila did her items, right? And then she told him that this is the one last item I'm going to try on you. And he's like, okay, bring it on, whatever. And this is Paul's words. He described, it's like a heavy, Sheila was on him, right, first of all, and then he had like a heavy thing pushed onto his chest, and once, and then he had it one more time. Paul, obviously being in the medical industry, knew that like Sheila had like bludgeoned him, but he believed that it was accidentally, because that's what Sheila was saying, right? Like, oh my gosh, that's an accident, I'm sorry. Happened twice though. And so Paul's like, call the ambulance, call police, I need help, like call them. So Sheila left the bedroom, and while she was calling the police, she was actually on a phone call with Nelson, saying that, like, making dinner plans with him, like, hey, do you want to come over, have some dinner together? And it wasn't clear whether Nelson said yes, no, but the fact is, she was saying that she was calling the police when she obviously wasn't. She was talking to Nelson on the line. She was caring more about what happens after the fact, that after Paul's gone. And she was waiting out this time, right? It's been now an hour that has passed, and you know, Paul is still alive. Paul is still bleeding. And Paul's like, so what did the ambulance say? And she's like, I couldn't get in contact with them, the line is busy. So somehow Paul convinced Sheila to like drive him to the hospital. So Sheila does that, right? She's driving him to the hospital. Then she gets into like an isolated little area of the parking lot near the hospital. And then she attempts to stab him for the third time, and she does. And this is the point when Paul realizes that this is not an accident, that this is purpose, and that she's trying to kill him. And he is, you know, he fights for his life. He gets a handle of the knife, and he actually ends up seeing some people outside, and they get him medical attention while Sheila drives off. She goes away. And what ends up happening is Paul, he gets to the hospital and he has to have open heart surgery on his heart because the knife had nicked his heart, and it was like a close call. Like, Paul could have died that night. And Sheila was easily found in a couple hours from the police. And at first, like when the police was having an interview with Sheila, Sheila was in the belief that her husband Paul had passed away, right? He didn't make it. And that's what the investigators made her believe, right? So she told her story of events. She said, you know, we were playing a game and, you know, he fell into the knife and all this types of lies, right? Because they know this is lies because Paul survived the attack and told his version of events, and her version of events made no sense for his injuries that happened. So, like I said, so Paul had survived the attack. Sheila's now caught in the lies, and the investigators took her phone and, like, you know, they figured out, obviously she didn't call for 911, but why did she call Nelson, right? And who is Nelson, and why is she talking to him when she's doing this to her husband, stabbing him to death? Why is she doing that? So what ended up happening is the investigators of the attempted murder of Paul spoke to the investigators of Annalisa's murder, and they figured out, they put two and two together. They figured out that Sheila is having an affair with Nelson. Nelson didn't even know about Paul, right? She was surprised to know that she was even married. He had no clue, because like I said, every single time Nelson would come over to Sheila's place, she would make Paul take all of his stuff away and get rid of it, and have no evidence at all that she was married nor even lived with a man. So Nelson was surprised that she was married, first of all. And then Paul was like surprised that she was like cheating with another man named Nelson. And he loved her. He wanted to do everything for her. And this whole, you know, having a brother come over story is all made up. Sheila's just a liar. On February 14, 2004, Sheila's defense was that she never meant to hurt Paul. She was just like emotionally distressed. But the opposite side, you know, they put the pieces together, right? Sheila wanted to be with Nelson. Sheila really wanted to be with Nelson and would do anything to be with Nelson, and felt like Paul was in the way for her to have her success and her happiness, her happy ever ending with Nelson. Like we saw before, when she was married to her first husband and she was cheating on him with Paul, she was in the best relationship with Paul at that time. So now it's the same thing happening again, right? She's married to Paul and she's having the best, in her mind, relationship with Nelson. She gets this type of like best feeling, I guess, when she's with somebody else while in another committed relationship. I personally don't understand that, but that is what she's doing, right? And that is, it seems to be a trend in her life, right? They allege that it's a possibility that her desire to be with Nelson may have made her even pursue the murder of Annalisa. They didn't have proof at the time, but they believed that this is the reason why she was going after murdering her husband, getting rid of everybody who was in the way for her to be with Nelson. So Sheila Davalloo on February 19, 2004 was sentenced to 25 years of jail time without any eligibility of parole. So shortly after Sheila was convicted of the attempted murder of her ex-husband, now at the time, Paul Christos, she was again publicly stated as the prime suspect in the case of Annalisa's murder. And Annalisa's father publicly stated that he believed that Sheila was the person who murdered his daughter. So now it's 2012 and the prosecutors have convicted Sheila of the attempted murder of her husband Paul, and they believe that they have enough evidence to convict her for the murder of Annalisa. So they took her to trial in 2012. And at this time, this was a jury of Sheila's peers, and she decided to represent herself in trial. The defense had a lot of evidence against Sheila. They had so much to the point that it seemed as though Sheila was putting herself at the fault by representing herself, because one of the prime evidence that they had was the 911 phone call to the 911 operator speaking about, get the police over to Annalisa's apartment. Because that voice, although they never identified who was on the phone during that phone call, that voice sounded exactly like Sheila. And Sheila was speaking the whole time during trial, right? So jury had a lot to think about when it came to that. Another prime evidence that Sheila had done it was blood in the bathroom sink. They took it as evidence, and it actually ended up matching Sheila's blood. And the defense basically had said that, during a brutal stabbing and a brutal attack like what had happened to Annalisa, sometimes the grip of the attacker can slip and slit their own hand during the attack. And this is what must have happened, because then Sheila ended up cleaning her hands in Annalisa's apartment, which left blood in Annalisa's sink. And then also Paul, her ex-husband now, had stated that, Sheila said that this was an accident, had noticed that she had cut her hand, right? And she said that this was an accident when she opened up some dog food, some canned dog food, and that's how the cut happened. But Paul remembers that she had a cut, and it was around the same time that Annalisa was murdered. Sheila, in her own defense, said that there's some reasonable doubt to the evidence that they brought forth in the case. For example, the voice recognition person said that they sound alike, right? The 911 operator phone call about Annalisa's murder and Sheila herself in person. They sound alike. Alike is not you are the same person, right? And then also, Sheila also argued the fact that, there's such a little bit of blood that was found in the bathroom sink. If she was really the assailant, there should have been much more blood. And then the third thing that she pointed out was that in Annalisa's hair, they found a blue contact lens, and that doesn't seem like something that Sheila would have at all, right? So that points away from her being the perpetrator of Annalisa's attack. But either way, the jury deliberated, and they came up to a consensus that Sheila Davalloo was the murderer of Annalisa Raymundo, and had sentenced her to 50 years consecutively to be served in penitentiary, and she has no option of parole. Are things that wives and husbands, married people say to each other exempt from court? Because even if they're meant to deceive or mislead and enable one spouse to have, you know, an affair from each other? Are they able to be exempt from court? That is something that Sheila's defense team wanted an appeal for her conviction, because in privacy of, you know, Sheila and Paul's then marriage, she had spoken about, you know, Melissa and Jack and Annalisa and, you know, all these things. And Paul had brought up all these things during the court proceedings, right? And Sheila believed that that had enabled the jury to convict her on the charges of her murdering Annalisa, because this was, you know, some evidence to show that, you know, she was completely, totally involved in everything that the relationship that was happening within the relationship. Decided ultimately that, you know, this is outside of the marital act, because this was something that Sheila was, you know, doing on her own. This was something that was an extramarital affair, and something that also was at the point of time just stories, right? So with that being said, the Supreme Court denied Sheila's appeal, denied that evidence that Paul had stated about how Sheila had told him everything. All of that is justifiable in court. And, you know, Sheila still had to remain in prison for the 25 years for the attempted murder, plus the 50 years on the separate charge of the actual first-degree murder of Annalisa. So Sheila now stays at the New York Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for women, and that's where she'll be staying for the whole 25-year period. So far she has served, if my math is correct, she has served 15 years of that. And during an interview, she spoke publicly with Piers Morgan from behind the bars, and he stated that she was like the scariest woman that he's ever interviewed, because, you know, Sheila is kind of delusional. That's nice of me. I mean, she is delusional. She has everything that I have said is apparently. Everything that I had said is just apparent, because Sheila has never, ever admitted to anything. Admitted to the attempted murder or the murder that she had done to Paul and to Annalisa. And she just, you know, she acts so like a person who's not in jail, a person who's just, you know, living her life, and this is what her life is, right? So delusional to the fact of what she has done. And I find that that's super scary. If you get a chance, you should watch that interview between, you know, Sheila and Piers Morgan. So with the 25 years plus the 50 years, should Sheila live to 110 years, she will be done her sentence in 2079 if no further charges or convictions happen to her. While Sheila admitted to her part and role in Paul Christos' attempted murder, she always states that she never intended to kill him. And then she always states that she was nowhere near Annalisa's apartment during the time of her murder, and she had nothing at all to do with it. Still to the day, she states that she had nothing at all to do with it. I'm just like wow, like, because there's so much evidence to state that she has, but who am I, right? But this is the story of Sheila Davalloo and what she had done in her love triangle, ending in the murder of Annalisa Raymundo and the attempted murder of Paul Christos. So please let me know what you think of this story. I'd be very happy to hear your thoughts on whether you think that Sheila's telling the truth, she's never did any of this, or whether you believe the evidence that Sheila had done all of these crimes. And let me know below. But thank you again for staying tuned and watching all the way to the very end. Thank you. I hope you come back another time to watch another crime and court case, and I'll be here next time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay good and see you later. Bye.